Greetings, my name is Jonathan Piper II, and I am the National Street Team Ambassador with Kingmakers of Oakland, and we are here with Breaking Bread. I got my guest here, Samm Styles, a native of Oakland, California, I believe, right? You're from Oakland, California.
For sure.
Filmmaker and into that realm of narrative storytelling, so I'm gonna let you get to that. But here at Kingmakers of Oakland, we strategize on how to engage the mind, body, and soul of our Black kings and queens that are in the school system and really create a sustainable community that they can thrive and strive in. And so that's our goal, and that's the work we do, is to engage, encourage, and empower all of our young Black men and boys, and to engage with our community members, those who have walked this journey and are still here, and just see what lessons we can learn to help the upcoming generation with just providing their future and taking charge of their education. So thank you for joining me. I want to give you some chances to introduce yourself. Let the people know who you are.
So my name is Samm Styles, from the Bay Area, from Oakland. Filmmaking is I guess what I've done for at least 25, 30 years, and with the nat teaching. That's a broad question. So I'll just leave it at that right now. We'll go for it. Yeah.
Definitely. So of course, filmmaking, that's very relevant to Kingmakers of Oakland today, because we just came out with our film with Kingmakers of Oakland. It's The Kings in the Making. No. We've had a lot of projects, so it's like got to keep up with everything that we've done all during the pandemic. But there's the album Kings in the Making, and then we have the EP Revolutionary Remix. I say Revolutionary Remix, but it's Revolution Remix. It's a tongue twister. It's right here on it's on the cup. Revolution Remix.
Right.
And so off of Revolution Remix, we created a video. It's like, have you seen Black is King by Beyonce?
Yeah.
So we created a vignette similar to that, where we have the music and we have some spoken oration from youth MCs, part of the street team. And that's relevant just because storytelling, music, art, that's ways that we carry our culture and ways that we continue the revolution. And so just you doing that and the way that stories have been told in Oakland, I think is so relevant. So I definitely want to speak on how you tell stories through film. Like, what has been your favorite stories to hear or to tell?
You know what? It varies, because I love cinema, and I love the genre itself. So I've been influenced by, everything from sci-fi to thrillers to, I'm a popcorn going, type of guy, So the stories I tell, they fall in line with those genres on purpose, because of the industry I'm in and how we gotta know all of it to do all of it, But specifically, since I am from here, my first thought is, the experience I live here, what I've seen here, the influences that it had on me here, as far as from my childhood to my present. So I write stories that obviously have that influence on it, but yet on the formula of cinema, So, I've written stories about, drug dealing. I've written stories on political activists, I've done stories on one-night stands and pregnancy, So, the beauty of it is that we, as filmmakers, that's our mission, is to tell you and show you comedy and tragedy, is to present to you the information from the culture that you're in. Everybody has their own. You see that in other films and things with that such, or programs, or shows. But because of the skin I'm in, I got to direct it towards what I see and what I know. But at the same time, respectfully, always make sure there's a solution on there. You know what I mean? Like, somehow try to figure out how to include that, because of what I see when I drive down East 14th. Damn, you know. So this is the great platform, Kingmakers, that I see it, you know, doing the same thing, you know, where you guys are putting out work that has a solution in it. You know, not only uplift and encourage, but has a solution. You know, so we're all doing the right thing. We're making sure we're taking care of, you know, doing our part, like-minded people, filming and putting the cameras on and micing up and telling these stories. So, yeah, I just did all that. Yeah.
Definitely. And so, of course, within every time era that we live in, there's some sort of tragedy or some sort of experience that leaves the whole generation, like something that they'll remember for the rest of their life, I think. And so we call that trauma. And a lot of times trauma is played out through media, through screen, and that creates kind of the environment that you're based around. If it's based around trauma, that trauma is kind of being soaked into you because you're in that environment. So with that said, with, you know, how we take in stories and all of that, how can media and film be used as a healing component instead of promoting trauma?
Well, I think for our people, we need to make sure that the Africanness of us, the African-centered, like, spirit in us is being included, you know. Just the power we have of this lens, you know, we have the power to manipulate or put out, you know, suggestion, you know. So I think the healing part, you know, is layered. So we got to use what we got. We got to actually, you know, look at what has worked in the past for us, historically, ancient, historically, all that, and find a common. So, for example, African drumming, right? Like, there was a time where those were the soundtracks, you know, or some type of, you know, musical input into the scene, you know. So just if we're writing something for camera and we got lights, camera, action type stuff, why not use African drums? You know, subconsciously, I believe that, you know, it'll have a certain effect. We'll recognize some type of something similar. We'll recognize something when we hear it, and, you know, so through the media, we got to start putting our symbols and sounds back in it, you know, to start our healing, just to get us back to, you know, a way that was you know, a way of thinking and living that was disrupted. You know, we are not on our right frequency right now. We're not thinking right. So the healing part, I think, comes when we start, you know, going back to the old remedies of things. You know, and in our world, you know, we got to be smart enough to know what our symbols are, to put it on camera, you know, to hear it. And those symbols are the symbols that we know, the symbols of the Ankh. You know, we got symbols, we got sounds, drums. So why are we running away from that? When we do run away from that, we get sick. We get discombobulated because we listen to other people and stuff. But if we were to take time to, like, actually, you know, not be afraid to look at who we were and how we were, and, you know, what we cannot live without, you know, I think that's just one layer of an example of how media and what we do can help. And just, you know, that's just one, but it's a lot, you know, that this camera thing can do. It's a lot. It can tell you the truth. It can lie to you, you know.
Distort reality.
Yeah, be involved with that. You know, it's you know, it don't have a conscience, or it's not, you know, conscious of what it's doing, but it's you know, in its due time too. It got some blood on its hands, you know. But it's, at the same time, the other part of it is being true to what it is, what it's capturing, you know, whether it be false or righteousness, you know. So as the makers of that, we got to be smart about it. We got to use it to our advantage, you know. Not tell so much. We got to hold some things back. We got to understand symbolisms and you know, our secret dialogue, you know, tap in with us, with our own selves.
It's important that you say that too, because when it comes to making a revolution, we say it won't be televised because we don't want all that stuff out there. Like, we don't want to give away the blueprint to the plan. Like, that way what's going to happen. That way you know how to block us. So definitely for my generation, when the media came in with Facebook and Instagram, and well, Facebook's not really our generation. Some of us use it, but with Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, like all these storytelling platforms, a lot of us tell too much, and then the story gets distorted, or people know stuff, and then they think they know everything about the culture, but they're only seeing part of it, the part that's glorified on social media. So I think there's definitely a part of that where we have to be reflective of.
What do you think it should stop at?
Stop at?
Yeah, like how much should we show? Where do you think we should stop? What do you think we should stop showing on that?
Well, that brings in the conflict of freedom of speech. I mean, I think everyone should be allowed to show what they want to show, but I have a big emphasis on respect. I don't like to see people being disrespected within the media. I don't like seeing the media being used as a tool to show people being disrespected. A lot of times, I think we should sometimes stick to our own business. The media was created to put other people's business out there, and a lot of times that doesn't allow you to think critically about what's happening in your own world, think about how your situation isn't different from the person on the camera. It's just different because they're in the spotlight. But put a camera on you, you're going to have the same issues, and you're going to want to hide away too. So for me, I think it should stop at where we don't let people feel like they're human. Like, we don't let them feel like they can make a mistake and change that. Like, we shouldn't allow them to feel the pressure of not being able to be comfortable in certain environments because of the repercussions that the media might have. I feel that as a black male, like, that could hurt my future, that could stop me from getting a job. That's the reality for a lot of people, but in my community, like, that's something that's really taught. Like, no, you can really, like, for young black men, you have to look a certain way, present yourself a certain way, because these stereotypes out here about you that have been built before you were even born are still going to stop you and the next generation from moving forward if there's not a change.
So you know what that sounds like to me? That sounds like healing right there. You know what I mean? Like, you just answered your own question as far as being aware of what's going on and having the ability to, like, okay, well, we should stop right here. So what you're telling me is that since we don't stop right there, that's when it starts getting, messed up, and we start bugging out and, getting traumatized. So we can pull that back, stop where the standards are and the morals. We're going in the right direction. We're on the path of, not doing too much to ourselves, to damage on purpose. Damn. It's suicide in a sense. If you're just blatantly just letting it all go, that's not African. I think that's not how we get, how we should get down.
Yeah, Baba C, the CEO and co-founder of Kingmakers of Oakland, has a saying. He'll say, healing the fish while treating the toxic ecosystem. And so the way that's framed for us in Kingmakers of Oakland is like our curriculum. For one, the fish is the young men that we're serving, the young men, women, non-binary, the black royalty, the people who came from, our ancestors. We're the fish. And the toxic ecosystem is the society that we're in, whether that's their community, the school system, the government. We have to heal the fish because our generation is soaking in so much. And yet, while we're soaking that in, the issues around us aren't changing. The ecosystem is still toxic, it's still being polluted. And so it's like you have to do work on both ends. Healing that fish, treating that toxic ecosystem. If we're the fish, you don't always have to wait on someone else to heal you. You can also heal yourself. So when you were younger, what were ways you found healing through that toxic ecosystem?
I don't know. What comes to mind, though, is one of my former professors at San Francisco State. His name is Dr. Wade Nobles. And I remember him telling us about the difference of, all right, bear with me now. So he was making an analogy about saltwater fish and freshwater fish, and how we as a saltwater fish have been put into a body of freshwater fish, which changed our whole, paradigm. you know. And the salt water for us over here was our Africanness, you know, was our African consciousness, was our customs, our language, you know. So once we came over here to the fresh water, that has been removed, so we're trying to adjust and, you know. And what he had said was like, you know, sometimes all you need is just put some salt in that fresh water, you know. So putting that Africanness back on us is how I think once, you know, in that arena of getting consciousness and understanding things of that such later on in life is what allowed me to like start doing what you know, the question you just asked as far as how to heal myself or what did I do in those younger years. That's what I did. I always had to make sure that if it's African drumming or if it's, you know, something that, you know, that I believe and think that would connect me to just a moment in time to just, you know, take a breath and just like, okay, let me think about it the other way now. Because we're conditioned to see it, you know, the wrong way. So I think that was the first thing that, you know, had me, his class, and there's a couple other ones, you know, Dr. Nathan Hare, Dr. Laura Head, Baba Obata, you know. So go to college, y'all, and make sure you take your Black study classes. But those were the moments that I would say started answering that question, you know, that I can really remember, that really hits me, that when I noticed, coming from Skyline, I wasn't taught at Skyline, you know. It was athletes, it was high school, it was real, but as soon as I get to San Francisco and this, you know, and I'm standing in that class with these, teaching us about us, you know. So I've always had that, like, okay, when I get to a certain situation, let me think about it the other way real quick. And 9 times, 10, most likely 10 times out of 10, the other way will be right because I'm conditioned to think the other way about myself, about my situation, about, you know, a whole lot of things, you know.
And so, as you said, we are conditioned to think a certain way, and that way sometimes leads us away from where we started from.
Exactly.
And one way we bonded was through books and knowledge and through education. What has been some materials for you, like books or movies, that really specify African roots? Like, how do you know that you're going back and getting that direct knowledge on what African history is?
I know because it's not white. I know that first, you know. Just the common sense of like, you know, this is what we do. It can go from, you know, Stevie Wonder and the Commodores to, you know, Spike Lee, She's Gotta Have It, you know, Eve's Bayou, you know, it's a number of things. My uncle, you know, introducing me to Malcolm X when I was younger, the Gods and Earths, you know, it's a number of things. My mom coming from New Orleans, my dad coming from New Orleans, telling me that my dad told me this one story where, you know, colored and white only faucets. And, you know, he was wondering, like, I want to know what's up with this water. Why can't we drink from this water? What's up with their water? Why is their water? So he actually, one day before he got to the faucet, he had saw this man working on the faucet, white man. And so that's when he was like wondering whatever. So then he drank from the colored side, which was his side. Then he drank from the white side. And he noticed that the white side was colder. This one over here was like room temp, you know, it was warm, you know. And he was like, he put 2 and 2 together, he was like, oh, wow, they just made theirs colder. It's not better, it's just colder, you know. So, yeah, you know, man, it comes from everywhere, you know, just paying attention and living just like y'all got to do. You know, let's circle back in another 10 years and, you know, your understanding, you know, your questions will be more like, oh, yo, you know, I done live a little more now, you know. I can answer that question myself, you know, because we would have gone through pretty much the same things as black men here. You know, you guys inherit what we still working on, trying to figure out. We're all under the same, you know, criteria of European living, we walked away from the principles of Ma'at, or, the principles of, how you're supposed to get down on certain, I don't know if I went off on a tangent. I'm sorry.
Just a bit, but
Yeah.
everywhere our conversations go, there's some interconnection, and that's what I love about Black history, about the way we teach education, is that there's always going to be some way to fit it into your identity. That's how Kingmakers gets down, is by recognizing that all identities, for one, we have to be human, and so we're not just treating the Black student, we're treating the human inside of you, and the rest of the world will see you as you are, but we want to treat that person who's really inside of you. And so whatever comes up or comes out from the work is the creation that was meant to happen.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. And when it comes to getting support from our adults in the community who know a little bit more, or who have this whole world going on where, like, your whole tangent of a world is different from my world. What advice would you give to other adults in your position so that they can connect with younger people who are seeking enlightenment from their elders in the community?
Just connect, man. Don't try not to, avoid your assignment. Like, our assignment stays on that. It's supposed to stay on. You seeing like-minded, then that's your assignment to go holler, and make sure that they get what you get. They understand what you understand about progress, success, hard work, standards, morals, because when you don't step into your assignment, I think as an elder, you're a sucker. You're really a sucker for not, doing your job. And, you're a sucker for not trying to do your job. You're a sucker for not researching to do your job, yeah.
And so for the elders, they have a job to do to give back for their community. And how about for the youth? What are your words of wisdom for young people who, for one, need to see stories that aren't from the white people, but actually need to see stories from Black people? How can they go and find those stories?
I don't know how to go find them. They just gotta look. They just gotta. I don't know. It's something in you first. They gotta want you. They gotta want you to, do better. I think the bigger mission of all of us is to try and do better. Build our character as a person. That's. So when you're not thinking of that, then you're not trying to go and seek the information. Because what ends up happening when you're trying to seek the information, you're gonna meet that teacher. You're gonna meet that elder. You're gonna come in contact somehow, some way. Because you're on your assignment, So we got these assignments that connect, If you're righteous, if you're doing the wrong thing too, your assignment is you're gonna meet with the wrong dude. Just gonna lead you the wrong way. That's gonna continue your assignment to go into the wrong direction, So I say to the youth, man, don't be no sucker as well, to think how you know what you know, How the hell do you really know what you know?
There's evidence that, what I try and know, for what I believe that I know, I try and find the evidence that backs up and then put into practice to show me that, that I know what I know.
So it goes that, we gotta, y'all gotta, how y'all know what y'all know. Check and see if it's right, and put the work. Try to see, to make it applicable.
What I will say is that for me personally, as a young person, sometimes I will think critically about a situation that allows me to see multiple views of it and understand where somebody's coming from their perspective. So I already understand, like, where they're coming from, where I'm coming from, how it differs, and what I should or should not say to spark up a conflict between our perspectives. And so I will say I've been able to develop a sense of that knowing, based off of how my environment has primed me. And so I think with young people who are able to do that, who are able to think critically on situations or to overanalyze what's happening in certain environments, based off of their maturity and based off of who they're around, that gives us a bit of knowing things that hasn't actually happened to us. And a lot of times we don't get credit for that. I will say that. I know, like, my parents will be trying to tell me something, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, I thought of that already, and I've already rationalized that. And like, you don't know nothing because you haven't gone through that. And I was just like, yeah, but I've experienced these 4 adults in the household who've all done this certain thing, and I've experienced how each of y'all did that, put that into my perspective, so I kind of know what I'm going to do off of that experience. But just because I know what I'm going to do, it's not going to be what you're going to do, doesn't mean I don't know what I'm talking about. And I think that's something that's kind of overlooked when it comes to the development of a young person's brain.
You're right. I think the parent also sees it from the perspective like, well, you still ain't been through it yet. You know what I'm saying? Like, your name is not on that bill. That's true. You know what I'm saying? So you may talk about all this, but your name is still not on that bill, dog. That's, I think they're, that the reason why they went like that. But yeah, you're right. You are completely right that you know what you know, but yeah.
But another way that we always love to go back to it is the original way, through a book. You gotta, find the right book, find the right author who has done the research and told the stories, and never just believe what you're told, but you gotta do the research to make sure that what you're being given is right or correct or has accuracy.
I agree.
And so that's definitely a word to the youth, because we don't like to read all the time. There's not a lot of young people who like to read now that we have this virtual digital thing where you can be given videos and audibles, but not that there's anything wrong with that, but you have to be knowing that, sometimes that information gets distorted. Lots of times that information gets distorted.
But that still doesn't mean that you know how to read.
You're right.
You know what I mean? It's like, I deal with kids, I'm teaching, and, these kids, they on here, they on there, but when it's time to like, they still don't know they still don't know what certain words are, So imagine a kid, on his social media, whatever it may be, and they get to a word, and, well, this is my students tell me, when they get to a word, if they don't know what the word is, they guess it. So therefore, that means that everything after that is just assumption, and you're just guessing, So, this information on social media, once, it could be real important, but once they get to that 2 compound word and don't understand what it means, so that's what I mean by it. So you can go on and still play the game or do whatever, but that does not mean that you still know how to read, because you're guessing, So, the quick fix to that is, if you got, if you don't know the word, look it up, since you're on there, right? So I say to youth still, you got lazy kids out there. You got lazy people out there. That's just, just going to guess their way through life. And that's trauma. Because they bumping their head on everything. They making stupid decisions. Then they getting rot for that. They get stressed out for that. They get depression for that because they know they're making wrong decisions, And then that affects the next person, And that's where that toxic part is.
Yeah, and when it comes to healing the ecosystem, is definitely taking responsibility on both sides. Like, as young people, have to take responsibility for the fact that we're not always using the platforms the way we should be, and that can have detrimental effects on our generation.
That is true.
I get mad at some of the adults in my family because they'll give the iPad to my younger cousin because they know it's going to make them be quiet, but then that's creating the dependency on that device to then, that forms an addiction. The way that the technology works, the algorithms work, is feeding off of parts of the brain, because the brain is the computer too. And the brain is trying to compute with this new information, but the way the new information is being presented to us is affecting it in different ways that we can't really comprehend. The eyes are being stimulated at the same time the ears are being stimulated at the same time you're seeing all these different colors and getting all this information. Your brain is working in excess to process all of this information, and at the same time the joy or the pleasure or whatever it is that creates your brain, the dopamine levels that creates it to get hooked into it. Now you're depending on that device to give you that information you've been looking for.
So at that point, what do you do? Do you interject somehow? Do you?
I did go and get some regular colorful books, and I try and bring them into my cousin's presence when they're not in their hyper energy ripping up stuff. But I will put on so sometimes if a book doesn't work or paper doesn't work, I use technology in ways that will create sensual experiences, but won't like rob you from experiencing something cool. So what I do when I'm on my phone, I look up ocean sounds and just look up like a visual of the ocean, and you hear the sounds, and how does that make you calm down? So how do I use my phone or my tablet to bring peace to my surroundings instead of being constantly busy? There's an app called Mesmerize, and it has like a background that's moving, and it has like a tantric healing sound, or have like vibration hertz. And so I use those as a way, even when I'm with my cousins, like some type of meditation vibes to slow down the brain and allow them to see the where they are, like process that moment in time. And then once you can do that, open up your mind, you'll see just how fleeting time has been and how much you've been wasting it on some devices or channels that haven't been fully supportive. So
now we're talking about, again, passing on, how to do things, how to solve a problem, how to so when you're with your cousins, it's like that's, you're an elder at that point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, what do you do as an elder you see the situation going down, you see the iPad, you see. So it's like, all right, elder, what do I do at this point to make sure that this is the right moment for him or her, because you see how it can be toxic. You got that knowledge. So once you know, you can't go back to not knowing, So if you see that as a moment that needs to be corrected, that's your assignment,
Damari, let's get a time check. What time is it? 2:51. All right, because I know we're going to be out of here at 3. So I'm going to just look at this and see what the last question was. All righty. So we've got 2 topics we can cover.
Right.
One of them is grief and gratitude. So how to overcome grief, and I know a lot of people have experiencing different, things with that, given the pandemic, given just being young and Black. How do we overcome grief in our communities and show gratitude? And then the next conversation could be about.
It's up to you.
I just looked at my phone and saw.
It was growing up too fast.
Yep, growing up too fast.
Yeah, got you.
And I definitely, there's parallels to that, like how growing up, how overcoming your grief can also lead you to growing up too fast.
Say that one more time. How overcoming your grief.
The path to overcoming your grief can lead you to growing up too fast. Because as I see it, you're still recording, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So as I see it, a lot of times young people, we're not taught how to grieve. We're not taught what grieving looks like. It's okay to grieve, especially young Black men. We're taught like it's not strong. You're not strong if you're crying. You're weak. We're taught that we can't show emotion because emotion. I don't know why emotion to some people seem like it wasn't manly, but like emotion was literally put into you so you can experience and feel things. I want to bring up this point because it's been so, when it comes to healing our ecosystem, healing our communities, some of the toxicness is not being able to deal with our grief. And how does that play out when you're raising young Black people in a community that has dangers in it, that has drugs, that has police violence, that has, there's so many different things that have been taking youth from the beginning of time in our communities. And grief, when you're dealing with emotions, there's a range of things that you have to process. So for you, growing up in your environment and seeing just whatever experiences you've seen or had to go through, what what does grief look like to you? What does it mean to actually grieve something? It doesn't have to be somebody, but what does it look like to kind of let go or to come to terms with your reality?
Mm-hmm. I think as far as grief is concerned, having experienced, I think the apex of grief in my life was when my brother got killed here in East Oakland. I think I can only explain that. I can only explain, that type of grief. Like it spun me out. It just, I never, eh. So, I don't know. I immediately got angry. I immediately wanted to, smash on the thing. And but what had me so prior to that happening, we was working on a music video, and we had to rent a U-Haul truck to put the equipment in, and so he was driving the truck. So there was a moment at lunch during the day, and it's like, he's looking at the equipment because he had been out like twice with me. He was looking at the equipment, like, man, you gonna make it, man. You gonna do that. So I was like, oh, okay, right on, bro. I was, just brother and brother, And but the way he said it and how it felt when he said it, I wasn't really sure what making it is, but whatever he saw, it was cool with me, So, years later, he gets murdered. And for the life of me, ever since then, I always hear that in my voice. That's what keeps him with me, and there's other things too, But the way I dealt with it, I never got over it, So grieving is like, it don't stop. It don't stop. You don't care who you are. Don't stop. Don't act like it. Every time you think about that person, every time you have whether it be a song or a location you drove by or the park or the lake, whatever, it's like something's going to trigger your emotion, So, I say don't even try to, all right, so my last day of grieving is today. Don't try for that. Shouldn't be your goal. Your goal should be like, how do I use that, to, in the spirit of, respectful of. Now, we bring in character into play. Now we're like, measuring ourselves against morals, because now you're focused on committing yourself to and honoring this person, that you love, that you love so much that had this change on your life. So I think that's when I started seeing things in a way to where because he said this is my path, he okayed it for me, So I just started using that and making sure that I stayed on that right path, that right wave, that right, energy, so that I couldn't, so I wouldn't, live his name in vain, and but I was still grieving. Still to this day, I'm grieving. This is '98, when it happened. So do the math on how many years that was, But that's it. I use that at the same time to make sure that at the end of the day, I'm celebrating, dude. I'm like, okay, that's my guy. And you cool? Did I do all right in yours? Did I put, all right, cool, But the grieving part will never stop. That's just my personal thing.
Yeah, I think for me, what was important was to realize life will always continue to move on.
Yeah.
And when I think of grief, sometimes in terms of how I've thought about it lately, it hasn't only been grieving people who've passed on, but grieving situations that no longer need to continue.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're dwelling on situations that made you feel some type of way,
mm-hmm.
that's a form of grief. You're like grieving a vibe that was
Right.
gone, or grieving the respect that just got cut off because somebody disrespected you.
Mm-hmm.
The longer you hold on to that, the longer you're holding on to a form of grief because you can't get that off your chest, or you didn't get that off when you could. And for young people in my generation, I know a lot of people can't get over things. That's why there's so many issues that we have. You know, there's a lot of drug addictions, there's a lot of suicide, there's like turf wars because people can't let go of what is ailing them or let go of their feeling of being disrespected or of something like that. And so I think we rob ourselves of the opportunity to be happy in certain moments because we're holding on to the negative emotions. And that stops you from exceeding or excelling emotionally, mentally, because you're blocked. That's a blockage right there. And I say that to say that when I experienced that, I found a level of maturity where like I don't know, it's weird. It's like, I was going to talk about how we grow up so fast and we're in these certain situations where our emotions, I think when you have to really check your emotions as a young person, to know what's going to tick somebody off, like that's a form of survival. Like, oh, is this person going to get mad at me, right? That form of like critical thinking develops you into having to become like a harder shell or like a guarded person. And then that just ties into when young people have to guard their feelings or guard how they're going to react towards other people, that robbing is kind of making them grow older than they are, because young people we're used to them expressing themselves through art or through what they're saying. Like, young people have no filter. And so when we force young people to filter themselves, I feel like that's robbing them of their childhood.
Is it though?
I feel like, well,
is it because we got to be able to identify what to filter though? There's things that should be filtered. And I think we're confused on, we're not filtering where we should be. Because if we were, a lot of our situations wouldn't be the way it is right now.
Yeah, when I say filtering, I mean like in terms of emotion, in terms of like being allowed to think critically. But when you say, there's some things that need to be filtered that haven't been, in terms of like how, I feel like language is a big thing. Like, I don't enjoy when older people are cussing around younger people, or like when you're calling younger people by words that have been classified as curse words. Right. So there's like things that young people are being exposed to that need to be filtered out. But when it comes to a young person being able to experience like their entire environment in a healthy way, you know, like Oakland has beautiful parks and we have beautiful food and music. Like, there's ways you can allow youth to go out into the city and experience positive vibes. And still be safe. And unfortunately, I feel like there's been times where the school system, the police system, even our parents are so afraid that they'll filter out our opportunities to grow and to have fun around these environments. And we're forced to maintain a level of strictness for our safety, but that's because we're conditioned and being taught like fear-based teachings. So we're conditioned to be afraid and to stay indoors, and that's robbing us from certain experiences.
So does that fear-based sound African or European?
It's European. Well, from what I've learned in terms of like, I read Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Joy DeGruy, and it was told to, the way I interpreted it was that fear was put into the African people. The enslaved people were afraid that their youth would be taken from them, and that was taught to us through experiences that were forced upon us.
So that toxic right there, the fear toxic, has to be treated as well. We got to reverse. That's what I'm saying about reversing the way we think. You know, we're not supposed to be thinking like that. We're not supposed to fear, you know, an opinion or what someone says or how someone looks. You know, when they, you know, come in the boardroom or they, you know, the principal of the school, we're not supposed to fear that. You know, a parent who is raising their kid and, you know, they're not supposed to fear raising their own kid, you know. That's not African, you know. And I think it also, that's the difference between the saltwater fish and the fresh fish, you know. When the saltwater fish is removed from their area, you know, they're trying to become this now for survival, you know. And I think that our fear is being used incorrectly, you know. It's so the kids, they grow up, you know, just as confused as the parents, you know. So are they growing up too fast? I don't know. It depends on what's their condition. You know, are they growing up real fast, you know, in reading? Why is an 8th grader reading at a 2nd grade level? Is he growing up too fast? You know?
Yeah, I definitely feel that.
But he can go and, you know, be a stick-up kid, and, you know, and is that, if he's growing up real fast there, you know, like what are we measuring? What's growing too fast, you know? They're not paying your bills, so they're not growing up that fast, you know. So what exactly are we talking about?
Yeah, I like how you put that. The way I've rationalized it is there's different categories that we fit in at different ages. So for one, there's maturity. Maturity can happen at almost any age, depending on your environment and what you've experienced. People told me I was mature from a very young age, but that's because of what I was experiencing from the people I was around, my vernacular, just, you know, being able to embody certain traits that I got from the elders in my community. Some positive, some negative. And so when it comes to young people being mature and then looking at the trauma that's happening in their life as they're also being called mature, to me, sometimes I'm like, young people had to grow up to me, sometimes that young person grew up too fast because they had to deal with certain situations that young people shouldn't have had to, but because of their environment.
Right.
That's one part of it.
I hear you.
And then there's adulthood, when you finally reach that age, whether it's 21 or 18, where you're finally an adult, and you're making adult decisions, or, you know, some people are like 25 and still haven't grown up. They're still doing childish things. They're still not mature, you know. So it's a matter of choice or circumstance.
But also I think, excuse me for that, but also I think that, you know, to be an adult takes a lifetime. You know, you don't turn 21 and you're an adult, and then after, you know, day 2 of being 21, you're not an adult anymore, or well, you're like, what happens? No, now it's just that paperwork. You know, again, that's a European perspective of when we're supposed to be an adult. You know, but you are an adult for the rest of your life. You know, so that takes time to develop. You know, so again, there's no, all right, I stopped being an adult 2 weeks ago. You know. that don't sound right. You know, that's not wisdom. You know, but you know, your brain isn't fully developed until 26, 27, somewhere around there. You know, so even though you've grown up fast because of your situations, you still don't know what you're doing. You're just trying to adapt to it. You're just trying to, you know, you code switching. You know, you're surviving. You know, are you living or are you surviving?
Right.
You know.
And that brings up a whole nother topic that we don't have time for, but that I would bring up, which is how, like, the difference between being physically mature and mentally mature, and how the word grown has been thrown into that and confused in terms of what it really means to be grown and to continue growing.
I think it's wrong. I'm sorry. Again, I think it's wrong for a mother to tell a son who's 9 years old, 10 years old, you're grown, what's up with my grown man? Or, you know, my man, you know, no. You know, if the boy is not taking care of his chores or doesn't have any chores, how you gonna call him a man? You know, and then when he does see a man, then he's gonna be confused, like, wait a minute, you know. So we got a lot of work to do. You know, we gotta be true with ourselves about a lot.
And that brought up, you know, a great point. Like, you call an 18-year-old a man, and he sees a 35-year-old dude who acting macho, who's a man. He's like, oh, if I'm supposed to be a man, I'm supposed to act like this. And you, like you said, we got people who aren't doing adult things in terms of paying bills and stuff, but you 18 and being called grown by everybody because you have a mindset, or you have your car, or because everyone wants to be an adult at a certain age. But there's a lot that comes with that whole world. And so that concludes this episode of Breaking Bread, where we really wanted to get into the African diaspora. Like, what does it mean to have our community centered on the African diaspora, and how can that help us move forward within our society? And a book that we both just so happen to have in our collection is The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. And so our conversations around healing the fish while treating the toxic ecosystem, making sure that you're healing yourself emotionally, mentally, and all of that really goes into Black mental health. And how do we promote a positive community when everyone's focused on their mental health? And how do the students blossom when that has been taken into effect, and the curriculum actually shows their culture, shows emotional range, mental range, and how to serve the entire student using everything that makes them human. So that's That was the center of our conversation. Check us out at www.kingmakersofoakland.org. We have merch available. Like I said, the Revolution Remix water bottles. We've got all music available on all streaming platforms. Look us up at Kingmakers of Oakland. And that concludes this episode of Breaking Bread.
I'm a king. All this hate from this fire that I bring. What I speak is in my veins, in my genes.